Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk, bringing you daily insights into global bestsellers. Today, I'll introduce you to the book, The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind. This seminal work in crowd psychology has been translated into over 20 languages and gained worldwide acclaim. Author Gustave Le Bon was a 19th century French social psychologist who earned his medical doctorate in 1866 and began practicing in Paris 4 years later. Like many scholars of his era, Le Bon was a polymath spanning anthropology, natural sciences, and social psychology. Looking back after a century, his contributions to social psychology and mass communication far surpass his medical achievements. This is primarily due to the crowd. The Chinese term wuhizizong carries negative connotations. Its English title, The Crowd, is actually a neutral term. Le Bon explores why crowds form, what drives individuals to join them, and how they become impulsive and irrational forces reshaping society. Many of Le Bon's observations remain crucial for understanding contemporary social phenomena. Now let's explore how Le Bon describes these powerful collective forces. The book comprises 3 volumes, focusing on defining crowd characteristics and their formation mechanisms. We'll examine 4 key questions to understand this work. 1. What exactly constitutes the crowd? 2. What causes crowds to form? 3. How do leaders influence crowds? 4. How should we evaluate the crowd? First question. What exactly constitutes the crowd? Let's examine Le Bon's definition. Le Bon's crowd has distinct characteristics. First, a collection of previously unorganized, unrelated individuals. Second, people united through shared psychological triggers from specific events. In defining crowds, Le Bon states that 1,000 people randomly gathered in public space without common purpose don't constitute a psychological crowd. Under Le Bon's definition, spatially gathered people like tourists, shoppers, or strollers by the lake don't qualify as the crowd. But if explosions occur causing panic-driven stampedes, shared fear creates psychological unity, forming a true crowd. Conversely, organized groups like armies or corporations aren't the crowd due to their structured command systems. Second, what psychological traits define crowds? Strangers become crowds through acquired psychological commonalities. What are these common traits? Key characteristics include primacy of instinct, overwhelming, collective power enabling indulgence of base desires. As mentioned earlier, explosion triggers crowd's flight instinct. Danger activates survival instinct alongside destructive or compassionate instincts. Looting during protests exemplifies destructive instinct. Conversely, donations to terror attack victims demonstrate compassion instinct. Second trait, mutual contagion. Emotions, actions spread rapidly through crowd. When others flee, you instinctively follow. This contagion leaves no time for reasoning, except for trained professionals assessing escape routes. Third trait, suggestibility. Crowds absorb implicit cues like fleeing without witnessing danger. 4. Irrationality. Le Bon argues crowds degrade reasoning. Collective intelligence declines. Individual judgment falters. Even highly intelligent individuals get dragged down to collective low standards when joining crowds. Some might wonder, how exactly does rational thinking deteriorate when individuals join groups? Le Bon doesn't provide explicit explanations. Here's my comprehensive interpretation. We each have our own emotional frequency. When joining groups through fear, beliefs, goals, individuals tune their emotional frequencies to match the group's. Some raise their frequency, others lower it, ultimately achieving emotional resonance through synchronization. This resonance makes individuals abandon independent thinking to maintain group synchronization. Crowd behavior isn't always negative. For example, people rescuing drowning children, even normally indifferent individuals, get influenced by group compassion. Severely ill patients sharing stories online often receive massive public support and donations. These donors essentially form Le Bon's defined crowd. This concludes Part 1's content. Summary: Le Bon's crowds aren't mere gatherings, but groups sharing common perceptions and beliefs. Unlike trained soldiers, corporate teams, they lack organizational discipline. Intelligent individuals in crowds become suggestible, impulsive, and intellectually diminished. Such crowds can create immense destruction or remarkable achievements. Second question: what causes crowd formation? Major historical events, like the French Revolution, demonstrate crowd-driven social movements. Chinese history contains similar examples like the Boxer Rebellion and student movements. How do such massive crowds come into being? What factors contribute to their emergence? Le Bon's framework categorizes causes into direct and indirect factors. However, crowd formation fundamentally relates to leadership, a subject so crucial it warrants its own chapter. We'll specifically address leadership's role in Part 3. Crowds emerge concurrently with social movements or upheavals. Major events often stem from minor conflicts, like tax reform debates, triggering the French Revolution. The king's arrogant taxation demands on the third estate bourgeois class fueled discontent. Post-meeting, aggrieved citizens began organizing resistance. However, mass discontent requires deliberate agitation to become actionable. Le Bon identifies 3 direct catalysts for crowd mobilization. First, the evocative vocabulary used during movements. These conceptually grand yet ambiguous terms prove highly provocative when articulated. Orators skillfully deploy such loaded language to incite action. Revolutionary, François, liberty, equality, fraternity become such mobilizing mantras. Second, collective illusions emerging during group actions. Le Bon argues civilizations have always been shaped by mass illusions. Readers of *Sapiens* may recall Yuval Harari's similar views on humanity's unique capacity for fiction. Both scholars observe how crowd settings amplify our capacity for shared fantasies. Even rational individuals succumb to revolutionary euphoria within crowds. Participants in mass movements often feel invincible, convinced of imminent victory. Third, the collective memory formed through historical group experiences. The king's taxation of the third estate through parliament predated the revolution, occurring repeatedly over time. In spring 1788, French peasants suffered severe drought before the revolution. Summer brought devastating hailstorms that destroyed crops completely. Winter famine, compounded by government inaction, created shared grievances among French citizens beyond direct causes. Le Bon emphasizes indirect factors in crowd formation. First indirect factor, race, reflecting Le Bon's racial determinism. Le Bon believed race fundamentally determines group temperament. He stereotyped French as impulsive and easily manipulated compared to other nations. Contrastingly, he praised English rationality, evidenced by their bloodless, glorious revolution. French revolutionary extremes included storming Bastille and executing Louis d'B. His comparative framework consistently favored English models over French examples. Second indirect factor, traditional influences shaping national character. Similar to Lauzun's cultural critiques, Le Bon emphasized national characteristics. Like Lauzun's frustration with Chinese passivity, Le Bon criticized French impulsiveness. He condemned French revolutionary traditions as dangerously radical. Third indirect factor, temporal dimension of social change. Le Bon viewed time as essential for developing traditions and political systems. He emphasized historical continuity. No achievement happens without temporal accumulation. Mass psychological shifts likewise require temporal maturation processes. Revolutionary energy needs time to accumulate before erupting. Fourth, indirect factor, political and social institutions. While acknowledging institutional influences, Le Bon considered them secondary factors. His narrative frequently contrasts Anglo-Saxon rationality with Latin impulsiveness. Le Bon argued that despite similar democratic systems, America thrived while Spain colonized. Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia suffered chaos. The final indirect factor, education. Le Bon's educational critique continued his racial determinism framework. He claimed French education turned graduates into societal enemies. This reveals Le Bon's core belief: race is fundamental, other factors being derivatives. This concludes Part 2's content. Summary. Le Bon's framework attributes crowd participation to direct and indirect causes. Direct causes include exposure to triggering events and persuasive rhetoric. Movement participants believe in collective power through shared experiences, memories. Indirect factors operate subtly, like spring rain moistening earth unnoticed. Race, tradition, time, institutions, and education constitute indirect factors.